Welcome again, students. So this video we're going to focus on what we should have covered in week 2. So we've got 2 chapters in week 2. The one is on overall supply chain management and the other is on demand forecasting. This chapter is going to focus on supply chain management. Yeah. Now, just as a quick reminder, in week 1 we spoke about business context, we spoke about supply chain management and that context, we spoke about value chain, and we spoke about how operations fit in. And we said the purpose was converting inputs into outputs, and you guessed it, in an efficient and effective manner. And within supply chain, we spoke about 5 elements. We said the starting point was plan, source, make, deliver, and reverse logistics. Okay, so jumping in here, I'm going to start off with sourcing or purchasing. There's 3 elements I want us to talk about today. The first one is supplier management, which is really around what's the process of how do I go about selecting the appropriate supplier. Now that I've selected the appropriate supplier, how do we put in contracts, service level agreements, etc. to ensure that the supplier is delivering according to what we want, not just in terms of price, but quality, quantity, etc. Okay. Then you come to spend analysis, also known as a Pareto or the 80-20 rule. And here what we're essentially doing is we're listing all the materials we purchase. We have the quantity and we have the dollar value in descending order, so that from a productivity is output over input perspective, I know from a materials point of view what my inputs are in terms of highest quantity items and highest spend items. So if I want to focus on efficiency and effectiveness, that's my starting point. That's essentially what spend analysis is all about. Then we've got sourcing, which is centralized versus decentralized. Centralized is essentially, we buying groceries for supermarkets. There's 10 supermarkets spread across the country. Centralized is we are located at one location, let's say hypothetically in Vancouver, Canada, and we are sourcing and purchasing bread for all 10 locations. That's centralized. Decentralized, each location, each store purchases for themselves. Each has its pros and cons or advantages and disadvantages. Centralized, for example, means if I'm purchasing it in a centralized location, I can accumulate all the volume, so I've got economies of scale, which means I can negotiate for things like quantity discounts and those types of things. Decentralized, that means each store is buying on its own. The advantage of that is the person based at the store fully understands what their local market looks like, what the trends are, so they can buy the right quantities and things like that. But obviously they lose out on the quantity discounts. So that's essentially what that is all about. Last week, or in week 1, we spoke about trends and what are the different trends, global trends, political trends, economic trends, etc. Diving into the supply chain, there's a few supply chain relevant trends. Some to mention are social supply chains, ethical supply chains, reducing our carbon footprint in terms of going green and our impact on the environment, outsourcing versus insourcing. In other words, make or buy. Do I make certain things myself or can I get it made at a third party? Collaboration and transparency. So our definition of supply chain was everything from the supplier all through to the consumer. That collaboration is how do I link those chains to make sure that there's transparency all the way through. IT and e-commerce, one of the trends we spoke about is AI. How are we using these tools? Do we understand what the risks are and what the mitigating plans are? How do we make our supply chains more resilient, lean, and agile so that we can convert these inputs into those outputs? Okay? So these are all the different things that looks into it. And what that helps us with is it helps us to make strategic decisions. How do I design my supply chain so that they are satisfying these trends. We're taking advantages of new developments so that we can deliver our product to the consumer and be competitive in doing it. And then from a system point of view, what are the technology and metrics that we would use? These we would be talking about in the coming weeks. If you remember correctly, in week 1 we spoke about strategy, tactical and operations. Strategy 3 to 5 years, tactics 6 to 12 months, operational is sort of the daily, weekly, monthly. Under deliver, we said we've got distribution and warehouse. So if I start down here at warehouse, first we have to think about from a warehouse capacity and design point of view. How do I ensure I design my warehouse so I've got space for everything that I need? This is where demand planning and forecasting comes in, because when I can forecast, then I know what my capacity requirements are. So that talks to design. Then we've got warehouse management system. Now, warehouse management system is essentially a part of an ERP platform that we can use to manage the stock in our warehouse. So if this is my warehouse and it's divided, think about your grocery cupboard at home. How do you know where you are putting your products? So after you buy your products, how do you know where you are storing it? Because if you can track where you're storing it, when you need to find it because there's a customer order, you can go and find those products quickly. And then what are the different activities in a warehouse? For example, we buy, we got inbound stock coming in, we do quality checks, we then put away that stock into storage. When we get a customer order, we have to pick that stock, we do a quality check again, and then we dispatch it with the invoice to the customer. And when you're dispatching it, that's when distribution and logistics then comes into effect. Okay? And distribution and logistics uses a transport management system, again, another module within the ERP platform, which talks to how do you go about planning your transportation to optimize your loads, your vehicle utilization, that type of thing. The different modes of transport that we get, you have to decide what do you use. So you got road, you got rail, you got flight, you got ship. Each one comes at a different cost, gives you a different lead time or speed and a different level of reliability. For example, putting a container on a ship. Speed, longer, but cheaper when compared to putting it on a flight where the speed is extremely quick, but it's also a higher cost. These are the decisions you have to make within your organization, which will enable you to make these decisions because you're trying to balance cost, reliability, service, etc. So moving on to the next slide. So I've already shared these 2 videos with you. I actually want you would have watched them by now, but it's an overview of the supply chain, a bit more graphical, and it sort of goes hand in glove with the explanations I've given you as well. Now, what I want you to do as an exercise, and you present this in class, is what would you consider when designing the layout of a warehouse? So in other words, what's included in a warehouse? As we said, you've got inbound, you've got put away, you've got storage, you've got picking, you've got dispatch. All your inputs or resources are around people, processes, systems. What are the different product types? What will you measure? So I want you to complete a very simplistic diagram. We're obviously not in a class environment, so you can't do it in a group. So you'll choose a product, for example, ice cream, and you will design a warehouse and show me where inbound is, where my racks are, how do I pick it, where's dispatch, where's my vehicles, etc. So read through the material, do that as an exercise, and when we're in class, I'm going to call on 1 or 2 students to actually just do this on the board, draw it out, and then we'll have a discussion as well. Okay, so thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this chapter, and we will chat soon.